Costa Rica lies towards the southern end of Central America, with only Panama separating it from South America. At just over 50,000 square kilometres, it is about 2.5 times the size of Wales, but has recorded around 9% of all the world's bird species. The reason for this is the diverse range of habitats in the country, ranging from tropical dry forest to wet lowland forest to mountain cloud forest, and everything in between. The country is very easy to get round, and I did a circuit over 23 days that almost covered the length of the entire country. After flying into the capital, San Jose, I headed north to Arenal, and then to Tenorio National Park. I then dropped down to the wetlands of Palo Verde before heading up into the world-famous Monteverde cloud forest. It was then back to the Pacific coast to Carrara National Park, before a long journey south to the Osa Peninsula, broken up by a stop at the Hacienda Baru. On the very sweaty Osa Peninsula, I stayed at Bosque del Rio Tigre, before heading back up into the mountains around San Vito for some much-needed cooler temperatures. I then followed the foothills of the Talamanca Mountains north before reaching some of the mountain peaks at Savagre National Park. The final part of my journey circumnavigated San Jose's traffic, stopping at Rancho Naturalista and then La Selva Biological Station, before heading back to San Jose Airport after one last night at the Tirambina Lodge. After leaving San Jose, my first stop of the holiday was at La Paz Waterfall Gardens, where, amongst others, I joined Rulenenska looking at the hummingbird feeders. The gardens contain a small zoo and a forest trail alongside the La Paz River and a number of waterfalls. Within Costa Rica, it is known as one of the easiest and best places to see a variety of hummingbirds up close. I was enjoying the great views of the birds until a hooligan came in and wrecked the place. As a result of this wanton vandalism, I retreated to a quieter area where the staff handed out personal hummingbird feeders. You can also risk salmonella by placing the feeders in your mouth. Not a great idea at the start of a holiday, but what the hell, live on the edge. After the captive jaguars started eyeing me up for dinner, I took a walk along the waterfall trails, not experiencing much wildlife, but with nice views and a lot of rain. Okay, I'm at the La Paz waterfalls. This is the first one, and that's all you're going to see because it's raining and I'm getting out of here. Bye! Okay, this is waterfall number 2, which looks remarkably similar to waterfall number 1, but it's a bit closer. Thank you. I took lunch a little further up the road at the Cinchona Soda and Mirador, soda being the local term for cafe and Mirador being the local term for Mirador. Once inside, yet another waterfall was in view, but I was here, along with many other birders, as a result of the bird feeders, which offered some seriously good close-up views of a lot of different species. La Paz Waterfall Gardens and the Cinchona Soda have provided an excellent start to the trip, and here's a small selection of the hundreds of photos I took on this first morning. After a 3-hour journey, I checked in at the Arenal Observatory Lodge, with just enough daylight to see views across the local rainforest, Lake Arenal, and the bottom third of the Arenal volcano, one of the most active in the world. I also immediately found that Arenal had its own band of hooligans as they ran across the front of my cabin to be fed by my new neighbours. As night fell, I got a great view of the Arenal volcano in a picture that was hanging on the wall. However, immediately outside the cabin, I got lucky and found a black and white owl. Only one coatimundi showed up on the lawn first thing in the morning, but I soon found all his mates up at the main part of the hotel underneath its bird feeders, with some great curassows waiting for the mob to leave. Up above the coatimundis, the actual feeders themselves were very birdy, and, as seen throughout the trip, the average size of a bird at a bird feeding station in Costa Rica is about 10 times that of the size of the birds in the UK. This gave the feeders a very top-heavy look, as a succession of large birds came in to feed on the fruity handouts. After breakfast with the birds, I went on a walk through the lodge's private forest, obviously seeking out another waterfall because I hadn't seen enough the previous day. It was quite challenging to get any photos in the forest, but I saw over 70 species in a 4-hour period. For the afternoon, I drove to the local town of La Fortuna, seeing my first sloth of the trip at the side of the main road. This was a brown-throated three-toed sloth, and you can clearly see the 3 toes, which it was using to play the bongos on its stomach and head until it just curled up into a ball to protect itself from an untimely hailstorm. In the town, another mammal and a agouti greeted me at a small reserve and feeding station called the Bogarin Trail. This was a great little sight, with many birds providing touching distance views. All the birds here had become habituated to people, and you can hear the noise of a coachload of American birders who are all sat in the open in deck chairs next to the feeders. The bully birds here were collared aracari, a member of the toucan family. Also showing well was a normally shy and secretive white-throated crake. Do you want to see some more photos from the Bogarin Trail? Yes? No? Yes? No? Yes? No? Yes? No? Yeah, go on then. At the end of the day, and the end of my visit to Bogarin, I came across another sloth. This time it was a Hoffman's two-toed sloth, a predominantly nocturnal species, obviously getting ready for a fast-paced night out on the town. The following morning I had one main goal, and that was to see a thicket antpitter. These birds just skulk in dense vegetation, but with a little help from playback I did, eventually, see one. But my best shot, and a video of its feet, did not exactly provide the textbook image I was hoping for. A much better shot was obtained from a fantastically obliging white hawk as I left the observatory lodge and got on the road for Tenorio. Just outside Tenorio National Park, I stayed at the Casitas de Tenorio, where I was welcomed by a very loud golden-mantled howler monkey. Casitas de Tenorio is the #1 rated B&B in Costa Rica, and it was easy to see why. I had a huge cabin to myself and was able to sit outside and relax and let some of the local wildlife come to me. The owners of the B&B also part own a private 220-acre rainforest reserve called Tapir Valley. While night tours are arranged to see the rare Baird's tapir, I instead elected to get up early for a guided bird tour, which is the only way to access the reserve. Although the weather was a little wet at times, I had an excellent morning with my guide, Donald Varela Soto, who is one of the owners. There are 5 species of toucans in Costa Rica, and I saw all but one of them on this trip. However, the feeding station at Tapir Valley provided the best views of the 2 largest species, the keel-billed and the yellow-throated. Among the many hummingbirds seen at Tapir Valley was a snowcap, one of the birds that is towards the top of every birder's wish list when they visit Costa Rica. While I was really happy to see this bird, I felt he could have been a little more polite. Dirty boy! It was blowing a gale by the time I reached Palo Verde National Park, one of Central America's most important wetlands. The park protects 32,000 acres, over half of which is flooded during the rainy season. I wasn't visiting at the best time of year, but there were still several thousand black-bellied whistling ducks, and a variety of other wetland birds amongst them. I got quite involved filming a succession of roseate spoonbills and failed to notice that I was almost treading on this black spiny-tailed iguana. With a length of around 3 feet, it was quite an accomplishment not to notice it, but it scared the living daylights out of me. After an hour or so at the water's edge, I took a drive around the many tracks in the area, trying to find a jabiru, a type of stork and the tallest flying bird in Central and South America. I thought I was just going to have an evening full of great and cattle egrets, until I eventually found a jabiru feeding in a field just outside the national park. However, once again, I should have been keeping an eye on what was around my feet, as I only realised once back in the car that this 2-metre long near-tropical whip snake had been on the ground right next to me. Right, well, I have no idea what that is, but I'm glad I'm in the car. That's all I can say. I don't particularly like the look of that. Flipping huge. Moving as well. Flipping heck. Excitement over, I headed for my accommodation, which was almost an hour's drive away, but I just made it in time for a dinner date in the restaurant with the only white-tailed deer of the trip. Up early for the slog back to the national park, this time I concentrated on the birds of Palo Verde's tropical dry forest, with a special target in mind. However, birding the countryside tracks on the way to the national park brought some early rewards. I also knew it was a good idea to check open areas for the double-striped thickney. My constant stopping and scanning paid off, with a pair found in a stony field. I saw quite a few nice birds in the dry forest, which was being guarded by a white-faced capuchin. However, I was having no luck with my main target until a bird flew in front of the car as I was leaving. With it landing close by, I reversed, got the bins on it, and couldn't believe it was my target bird, a lesser ground cuckoo, which probably gave me better views than if I'd been on foot. This was a cracking bird, and I began the long journey uphill to the Monteverde cloud forest with a spring in my gearbox.